grading work when you're trying to create a system that values deep thinking and collaboration.
Right.
That's exactly what we're going to be tackling today.
Yeah.
We're looking at Chapter 14 of Building Thinking Classrooms in Mathematics.
Okay.
And it really digs into this tricky issue. You know you've worked so hard
Mm-hmm.
to create this dynamic classroom where students are collaborating and learning from each other.
Yeah.
But then, bam, traditional grading practices just come in and kind of like undermine everything you've been working towards.
Yeah, it's like this real tension. The chapter really highlights
right.
it. It's like, on the one hand, you've got the collaborative nature of learning, especially in a thinking classroom environment.
Exactly.
And then on the other hand, you have this very individualistic nature of assessment.
It just feels like a mismatch.
Yeah.
You know, we're telling our students, hey, work together, learn from your mistakes,
Right.
revise your thinking.
Right.
And then suddenly it's like, okay, now you're on your own. Every single point counts.
Exactly.
It sends such mixed messages, I think.
It totally does. And the chapter really argues that this problem runs even deeper than just testing, too.
Really?
It goes back to this whole idea of traditional grading being all about, like, point gathering.
Point gathering. Okay.
Every assignment, quiz, test, it all becomes about, like, racking up those points.
Uh-huh.
And what often ends up happening is the focus shifts.
Oh, I see.
It moves away from real learning.
Interesting.
And it becomes more about just getting the right answer, just to get those points.
Yeah. Just for the points.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is how it's always been done, right? Like, what other way is there?
Yeah, so the chapter proposes this pretty big shift,
Oh, shit.
moving from this point-gathering paradigm to a data-gathering one.
Data gathering.
Yeah.
Okay, so instead of, like, obsessing over points,
Exactly.
we're shifting to, like, focusing on the evidence of what students actually know.
Yeah, evidence of learning.
Evidence of learning, I like that. But what does that even look like in practice?
Yeah, good question.
Do we just, like, get rid of grades altogether?
Not necessarily.
No.
It's more about kind of reframing what grades really mean.
Okay.
Instead of being just a measure of how many points someone's gotten,
Right.
they become a reflection of the evidence that you've gathered, about their learning progress.
Okay, so how do we gather that evidence then?
Yeah.
Is this, like, constant observation, portfolios? I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
So the chapter actually offers a really specific system for tracking student learning.
Oh, yeah.
And it's honestly more straightforward than you might think.
Really?
It's all about using these 6 really simple indicators
Indicators, okay.
to document what students are able to do.
Okay.
So for instance, just a simple check mark.
Okay, so that means...
That means a student showed they knew the material,
Gotcha.
like individually, on their own.
Got it.
Then there's like a check mark with a little S.
Oh, okay.
So that means they got it right, but maybe like a little careless error slipped in.
Oh, okay, I see.
And then you've got S if they needed a bit of help,
Help from.
like from the teacher or maybe a classmate.
Okay.
Then there's H if they showed they knew it, but like in a group setting.
Mhm.
X is for like a straight up incorrect answer.
Makes sense.
And then lastly, N if they just didn't even try the problem.
Okay, yeah, okay. I'm kind of starting to see how this could work.
Yeah.
So instead of giving, like, points for every little thing, you're using these indicators
Exactly.
to build this, like, more detailed picture of what each student understands.
Precisely.
But I can already hear the pushback from some teachers.
Yeah.
Like, keeping track of all those indicators for every student. That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, I hear you. It definitely requires a different way of thinking about assessment. And the chapter acknowledges that, there's going to be a learning curve.
Yeah, for sure.
But it also really emphasizes that this system can actually be more efficient.
More efficient than traditional grading.
Yeah, in the long run.
How so?
Well, think about all that time you spend grading assignments.
Yeah.
And some of them, let's be honest, don't really tell you that much about what the students actually learned.
Right.
Like all those worksheets just to have something to put in the gradebook.
Oh, for sure. Busy work.
Yeah, exactly. Busy work. But this data gathering approach, it helps you be more intentional
Okay.
about what you're assessing and how.
So it's not just about collecting more data. It's about, like, being smart about the data you collect.
Yeah.
Making sure it's meaningful.
Exactly. Data that actually tells you something about student learning.
I like that. And I bet it leads to much better conversations with students about their learning too, right?
Absolutely.
You're not just talking about the points they lost
Mhm.
or earned. you're actually talking about specific things,
Exactly.
like where they're excelling, where they're struggling.
Right.
It really encourages them to focus on progress,
Exactly.
not just like chasing points.
Yeah.
This is making a lot of sense.
Good.
But there's one thing I know teachers are going to ask.
What's that?
How do you turn all this data into an actual grade?
Yeah, good point.
Parents still expect to see those letter grades on report cards.
Right. And those aren't going away anytime soon.
Exactly.
But the chapter does give some clear guidelines for how you translate all this data into those grades.
Okay,
And it's all based on two main principles.
two principles. All right, let's hear them.
First, there's minimal attainment of basic levels.
Minimal attainment of basic levels.
Okay. And then second, we have backward compatibility of achievement levels.
Backward compatibility.
Yeah.
Okay, let's break those down a little bit. What does minimal attainment of basic levels even mean?
Okay. So basically it means that for a student to pass, like a unit or a course,
Right.
they got to show that they've at least got a basic grasp.
Grasp of.
All those key concepts.
Okay.
They can't just like ace one thing and totally bomb another.
So like if a student is amazing at solving equations,
Yeah.
but they don't get basic fractions,
Yeah.
they wouldn't pass, even if their equation skills got them enough points to pass.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
The focus here is on mastering those foundational concepts.
Okay.
And the data you're gathering with those 6 indicators.
Yeah.
That will show you really clearly whether or not they've hit that level of understanding.
Okay. Got it. Now, what about that second principle?
Okay, so backward compatibility.
Yeah, that sounds a little technical.
I know, right?
What does it mean in plain English?
Basically, it means if a student shows they're good at something at an advanced level,
Okay.
you assume they've also got those basic and intermediate levels down pat.
So, like, if they could do complex geometry problems,
Yeah,
you can safely assume they get the basics of shapes and angles, too.
exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like those building blocks.
Yeah,
You can't get to the advanced stuff without that solid foundation.
exactly. And by using these two principles with the data you've collected,
Yeah.
you can give grades that actually reflect the student's overall understanding.
So it's not just about points earned. It's about genuine understanding.
Exactly.
Ah.
And the chapter argues that this shift can make assessment more accurate and fair.
That's a pretty strong argument. But I'm sure teachers have concerns.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Things like, grade inflation,
Mm-hmm.
subjectivity, the time it takes to manage all this data,
Yeah.
and even student motivation.
You're reading my mind. Those are all really valid concerns.
Hmm.
And we'll dive into each one of them.
Perfect.
But first, a quick break. Stay with us.
Okay, so before the break, we were talking about some concerns teachers might have about switching to this data gathering system.
Right.
First, upgrade inflation.
Yeah.
Seems like some folks are always worried that any new grading system is going to mean everyone gets an A.
It's a common fear. But the chapter makes a good point. This system actually kind of fights against grade inflation.
Oh, really?
Because you set a clear standard.
For
What students need to know and do to actually earn a passing grade.
So it's not about lowering standards.
No, not at all.
It's about shifting the focus.
From just getting points to actually demonstrating understanding.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about subjectivity?
Yeah,
It seems like there's a lot more room for teacher interpretation in this system.
that's true.
Could lead to some inconsistencies in grading, maybe.
That's a fair point. But the chapter emphasizes how important it is to have clear learning goals
Okay, yeah.
and well-designed assessments.
Right.
When you know exactly what you're trying to assess
Mhm.
and you use different ways to gather data,
Yeah.
you actually reduce subjectivity.
Interesting.
Plus, traditional grading isn't always perfectly objective either.
That's true.
Ever had one of those assignments that just didn't fit the rubric?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
It's tough to decide on a point value then.
Totally. So it's not that data gathering is inherently more subjective.
Right.
It's just that it makes us really think about our assessment choices.
And be transparent about them.
Makes sense. Okay, but let's be real time.
Yeah.
Teachers are already swamped. How are they supposed to track all this data for every student?
Time is definitely a big concern for teachers, and the chapter recognizes that. The system takes some adjusting,
For sure.
but it also gives you some ways to make things easier.
Okay, like what?
Well, one big thing is to really think about what you're assessing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to track every single thing students do.
Okay, that's good.
Focus on the key learning outcomes for each unit
Right.
and choose assessments that fit those outcomes.
So working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And maybe even letting go of some of those assignments that don't really tell you anything useful.
Ah, the busy work.
Exactly. The busy work. And another thing, get the students involved in tracking their own progress.
Oh, interesting.
They can use those 6 indicators too.
Okay.
Gives you more time. And it helps them think more about their own learning.
I love that. Gives them ownership.
Right.
Okay, but what about motivation?
Yeah, that's a big one.
If students aren't chasing points, won't they just slack off?
That's a worry a lot of people have with new grading systems.
For sure.
But the chapter actually brings up some research.
Oh.
It suggests this kind of assessment can boost motivation.
Really?
Because when students feel like their progress is being recognized and valued, they're more likely to be motivated to learn for its own sake.
So not just to get a good grade or please the teacher,
Exactly.
but because they actually enjoy learning,
Exactly.
because they want to master those skills.
That's the idea. It's about shifting from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation.
Wow, that's powerful. It's like you're rewiring how they think about learning.
Exactly. And when that happens, it can have a huge impact on their engagement and their success.
This has been so helpful. We've really broken down this chapter, I think,
Yeah.
and talked through those worries that teachers might have.
I hope so.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear what you think teachers can do to start putting this system into practice.
That's a great question. The chapter actually gives some really clear steps. First, start small.
Okay.
You don't have to change everything all at once.
Right, right.
Maybe pick one unit or one subject to try this out.
Okay, so like a pilot program.
Exactly. And be transparent with your students.
How about?
Explain why you're doing this, how it will help them.
Yeah, that transparency is so important.
It is. Students can get really thrown off if they feel like the rules are constantly changing.
Definitely. And what about parents?
Yeah, good point. Involve them in the process, too. Explain the reasoning behind the new system
Mm-hmm.
and how it'll actually give them a better picture of their child's progress.
Okay, so good communication is key.
It really is. It can help ease any worries they might have about changes to grading.
Totally. Any other advice for teachers making this shift?
Be patient. It takes time to get used to any new system. There will be bumps in the road.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Don't expect to be perfect right away.
Right.
Be willing to try things out, see what works, and adjust as you go. And don't forget, you're not alone in this.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Connect with other teachers who are trying this out, share experiences, support each other.
That's such a good reminder. We're all in this together, right?
We are. And by sharing what's working and what isn't, we can all learn from each other.
Exactly. Create a more supportive and innovative environment for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say a teacher is ready to give this a shot. What's a good first step?
I'd say the first step is to really get comfortable with those 6 indicators.
Oh, yeah, the check mark. The check mark with the S, the H, the X, and the N.
Exactly. Those are your building blocks.
Okay.
Once you really understand what they each mean, then you can start thinking about how to use them.
With your current assessments.
Exactly. You don't need to create all new stuff.
So you're saying I can use the same quizzes, tests, projects, observations.
Yeah.
But instead of giving points, I use those indicators to track what students are showing me.
That's it. And that's where those instruments come in, those checklists we talked about.
Okay.
You can create one for each unit or each topic,
Right.
and then use it to keep track of student progress on those key learning outcomes.
All right, I'm starting to get the hang of this. But what about those tricky situations?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what if a student's work doesn't neatly fit into one of those 6 indicators?
Yeah, good question.
What if they get the right answer, but their thinking process is all over the place?
Right.
Or what if they show they understand some of it, but not all of it?
Yeah, those are the tricky ones. And it's where teacher judgment comes in.
So those indicators aren't set in stone.
No, not at all. They're a starting point,
Okay.
but they're not meant to be super rigid.
So there's still room for flexibility.
Absolutely. We're not trying to eliminate teacher judgment. We're just trying to give you a framework that helps you be more consistent
Okay.
and more intentional in your assessments.
So it's about finding that balance
Yeah,
between structure and flexibility.
exactly. And as you use the system more, you'll find your own ways to capture those nuances and make good decisions about how to represent what students are learning.
In a way that's both accurate and meaningful.
That's the goal.
So it's a journey, not a destination. And it takes willingness to experiment and learn and adjust along the way.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. And that's one of the most exciting things about this approach.
Oh, yeah.
It's not one size fits all. It's flexible.
Okay.
You can adapt it to fit your needs and the needs of your students.
I love that. It gives teachers the power to really own their assessment practices
Exactly.
and build a system that truly reflects what's happening in their classrooms.
Yeah.
This has been so eye-opening. I bet this is going to start a lot of good conversation
I hope
in
so.
classrooms and staff rooms everywhere.
Yeah.
So to all our listeners out there, keep thinking deeply about this stuff.
Absolutely.
Keep trying new things and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in education.
Couldn't agree more.
And if you want to share your experiences or ask questions, we'd love to hear from you.
Definitely. Reach out on social media or through our website.
We're all in this together. Let's keep learning from each other and working to create classrooms where every student can truly thrive.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep diving deep. If a teacher is listening and thinking, okay, I'm ready for this, what's like the one biggest piece of advice you'd give them?
I'd say don't be scared to try things out, even if you make mistakes along the way.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's a journey, you know? There's no one right way to do this.
Right.
The important thing is to keep thinking about it.
Keep reflecting.
Yeah, reflecting. Ask yourself, is my grading system really showing what my students know?
Does it reflect their understanding? That's such good advice. Be bold, be thoughtful, and trust your gut.
Yeah,
And if it gets tough, remember, you're not alone. There are so many teachers out there going through the same thing,
that's right.
ready to share their stories and support each other.
Absolutely. We're all in this together. And when we challenge those old ideas about grading and try out this data-driven approach, I think we can make learning so much better for everyone.
More equitable, more meaningful.
Exactly.
Wow, this deep dive has been incredible, really thought-provoking.
Good. I'm
I
glad.
think it's going to spark some really important conversations
I hope so.
in schools everywhere.
Yeah.
So to all our listeners, keep thinking, keep experimenting.
Yeah,
Don't be afraid to push the limits of what's possible in education.
absolutely.
And if you're feeling inspired, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, ask questions
Yeah, connect with us.
on social media or through our website.
We're all learning from each other. Let's create classrooms where every student can really shine.
That's what it's all about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep diving deep.